Chapter 13. The night deepened around General Marcus' mansion, the lanterns flickering like distant stars caught in a tempest. Inside, the grand hall pulsed with the vibrant energy of the gathering, a kaleidoscope of laughter and music. Yet, amidst the gaiety, a sense of foreboding loomed, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. Clara moved through the crowd, her senses heightened. Every smile seemed laced with irony, every toast a veiled threat. She was acutely aware of the weight of the evening, a prelude to something darker lurking just beneath the surface. The general's charismatic facade masked a tumult of ambition and menace, and Clara felt the chilling realization that he was orchestrating more than just a political maneuver. Her thoughts were interrupted when she caught sight of Marcus across the room, deep in conversation with a group of influential townsfolk. He gestured animatedly, his face alight with fervor, but Clara noticed a glint in his eyes that sent a shiver down her spine. It was a glint she had seen before, one that spoke of calculated manipulation rather than genuine camaraderie. As the evening wore on, Clara felt an inexplicable pull toward the dimly lit study, a room adorned with maps and military paraphernalia that seemed to echo the general's own ambitions. It was there that she caught a glimpse of the true machinations at play. Stepping quietly, she peered through the slightly ajar door, her breath caught in her throat. Inside, Marcus stood with a few of his closest confidants, their voices low and conspiratorial. The atmosphere crackled with tension as they plotted their next moves. "The town is ripe for the taking," Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk but laden with menace. "Clara may be weak, but with the right pressure, we can ensure her loyalty. We will crush any dissent before it takes root." Clara's heart raced as she eavesdropped, the words striking her like arrows. She could scarcely believe what she was hearing. The plan to manipulate her, to use her as a pawn in his quest for dominance, was laid bare before her. Each calculated word was a reminder of the power Marcus wielded, not just over her, but over the entire community. One of the men, a local businessman whose fortunes had long been tied to the general's influence, chimed in. "And if the townsfolk resist, we can remind them of the consequences of defiance," he suggested, a cruel smile curling his lips. "Fear is a potent weapon." Clara staggered back from the door, her mind racing. The revelation of Marcus's true intentions sent her spiraling into an abyss of doubt and outrage. She had been so caught up in the facade of the campaign that she had allowed herself to be blinded by ambition, unaware that she was merely a pawn in a much larger game. Determined to confront Marcus, Clara's resolve crystallized into something fierce and unyielding. She could not allow him to manipulate her or the community any longer. The townsfolk deserved a leader who would fight for their interests, not one who would exploit their trust for personal gain. With newfound clarity, Clara re-entered the hall, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the room's attention shift as she approached Marcus, who had just finished a particularly grandiose toast. The laughter and music faded into a distant hum as she stood before him. "General," she began, her voice steady despite the tumult within, "I need to speak with you. Alone." The crowd parted, curiosity etched on their faces, but Clara was oblivious to their gazes. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features, but he nodded, gesturing for her to lead the way. As they retreated to the study, Clara's mind raced with the implications of the confrontation ahead. She was no longer the naive participant in his elaborate charade. She was ready to unveil the truth, to reclaim her agency. The evening, once a mere gathering, had transformed into a defining moment, a chance to confront the shadows that had long haunted her aspirations. In the dim light of the study, surrounded by the very symbols of power Marcus sought to wield, Clara prepared to challenge him. The stakes were high and the outcome uncertain, but as she faced the man who had sought to manipulate her, she felt a surge of courage. It was time to unveil the plan, not just for herself, but for the future of Eldritch. Chapter 14. The study was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of aged wood and the faintest hint of leather. Clara stood before General Marcus, the weight of their impending confrontation pressing down like the thick, oppressive fog that often enveloped Eldridge. The door clicked shut behind them, severing the laughter and music of the grand hall from the tense atmosphere inside. In that secluded space, every shadow seemed to harbor secrets, every flicker of light a reflection of the duplicities surrounding them. Clara's heart raced as she faced Marcus, whose eyes glinted with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. "What is it, Clara?" he demanded, his tone brusque, yet tinged with an undertone of amusement, as if he were merely toying with a wayward child. "We are in the midst of a celebration." "Celebration?" Clara echoed, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions roiling within her. "Is that what you call it? A masquerade, perhaps, where the truth is shrouded in glitter and charm? I overheard you tonight, General. I know your plans." Marcus's expression shifted, the veneer of charm cracking like porcelain under pressure. "You misunderstand," he began, but Clara interrupted, emboldened by the clarity of her resolve. "No, I understand all too well," she insisted, stepping closer, her pulse quickening. "You intend to use me as a puppet, to silence dissent with intimidation. You believe that fear is a weapon that can secure your power, but you underestimate the strength of this community and my own resolve." For a moment, silence enveloped them, the tension thickening the air. Marcus regarded her with a mixture of surprise and admiration, as if he were witnessing a transformation he had not anticipated. "You're playing a dangerous game, Clara," he warned. "You think you can rally the townsfolk against me. They are loyal to power." "Loyalty born of fear is no loyalty at all," Clara countered, her voice rising with conviction. "The people of Eldritch are resilient. They've endured your manipulation long enough. I will not stand by while you turn them against each other." A flicker of something dark passed across Marcus's face. Anger, perhaps. Or frustration. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he said, his tone becoming more menacing. "You think this is about you? You're merely a means to my end. I can make or break you, Clara." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Clara felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to yield. "Then so be it," she replied, her voice resolute. "But I will not be complicit in your schemes. I will speak the truth, and I will rally the townsfolk against you if that is what it takes." With that declaration, Clara felt a rush of adrenaline surge through her veins. The shadows in the room seemed to retreat slightly, as if acknowledging her newfound strength. Marcus, however, remained an immovable force, his expression hardening as he studied her. "Very well," he said finally, his voice colder than before. "If you wish to position yourself as their champion, I'll allow it. But know this, I will not be so easily dismissed. The people will soon realize that you are no match for the power I wield." Clara met his gaze, unwavering. "And they will see through your deception. The truth has a way of surfacing, General. You may have the upper hand now, but I will show them that there is strength in unity and truth." With that, Clara turned to leave the study, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She stepped into the hallway, the sounds of the gathering washing over her like a tide, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. As she rejoined the guests, the music swelled once more, but Clara's mind was alight with a different kind of rhythm, a call to action that pulsed with the promise of change. Though the night may have been steeped in deceit, she was resolute in her quest for truth. The masquerade would not last forever, and she was ready to unveil the reality hidden beneath the masks. Chapter 15. The atmosphere in Marcus's mansion had shifted dramatically, the once vibrant air now thick with an uneasy tension. As Clara emerged from the study, her heart raced, a pulse of defiance coursing through her veins. The gathering continued to swirl around her, yet she felt as though she were moving through a dream, the laughter and music dulled to a distant echo. She was acutely aware of the stakes, the chasm that had opened between her and the general, a distance that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The evening progressed, but Clara's mind was ablaze with thoughts of her confrontation with Marcus. She could scarcely focus on the conversations that flitted around her like moths drawn to a flame. Each smile felt rehearsed, each laugh a hollow sound. The townsfolk, oblivious to the darkness lurking behind the facade of merriment, danced and drank, caught in the web of Marcus's charm. Suddenly, a loud crash shattered the evening's festivities, drawing Clara's attention. Glass shattered against the marble floor, the sound reverberating through the hall like a gunshot. Clara turned toward the source of the commotion, her heart racing. A group of townsfolk had gathered near the entrance, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Clara pushed through the throng, her instincts heightened. At the doorway stood a figure, breathless and wild-eyed. It was Thomas Grayson, his face pale as he fought to regain his composure. "They're coming!" he shouted, his voice breaking through the din. "The soldiers! Marcus has sent them!" A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Clara felt a cold wave wash over her. Soldiers? What could Marcus be planning? The realization struck her like a thunderclap. This was not merely a celebration, but a trap. A calculated move to reassert his dominance over the town. "Everyone listen," Clara called, her voice rising above the chaos. "We must remain calm. We cannot let fear take hold." But her words felt fragile against the growing panic that ignited the room. The townsfolk began to stir restlessly, eyes darting toward the exits, their laughter giving way to whispers of dread. Clara's heart sank as she saw Marcus, a self-satisfied smile plastered on his face, observing the scene from a distance. He reveled in the turmoil, a puppeteer watching his strings unravel. "Clara, we must get out of here," Thomas urged, his eyes wide with fear. "They're here to shut us down, to silence anyone who opposes him." Just then, the doors burst open, and a contingent of soldiers filed into the hall, their uniforms gleaming ominously under the chandeliers. The room fell silent, the laughter extinguished like a candle snuffed out by a sudden gust of wind. Clara's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. Marcus had turned the celebration into an ambush, using the guise of unity to mask his true intentions. "Citizens of Eldridge," a soldier barked, stepping forward, "you are hereby ordered to disperse. General Marcus requires your full compliance." The authority in his voice sent a shiver through the crowd, and Clara felt the weight of despair settling over them. But something stirred within her, a fierce determination. "This is our town," she shouted, stepping forward, her voice cutting through the fear. "We will not be silenced by intimidation. We will stand together." The soldiers hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes as they regarded the growing crowd. Clara could see the townsfolk rallying together, their fear transforming into resolve. She sensed the shift, the collective spirit igniting like a spark in dry tinder. "Stand with me," Clara urged, her voice ringing clear. "We will not let fear dictate our future. We will reclaim our voices." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and slowly, people began to step forward, emboldened by her words. Clara felt the tide turning, a wave of courage swelling within the room. The soldiers, momentarily taken aback, exchanged wary glances, unsure how to respond to the unexpected unity brewing before them. In that moment, Clara understood that the path ahead would not be easy. The darkness that Marcus had unleashed would require strength and resilience to confront. But as the townsfolk gathered around her, she felt an unbreakable bond form among them, a shared determination to stand against oppression, to reclaim their voices, and to resist the unthinkable. The night, fraught with deceit, had transformed into a crucible of courage, and Clara was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Chapter 16. The tension in the grand hall escalated, thickening the air until it felt suffocating. Clara stood at the forefront, her heart pounding in sync with the mounting chaos around her. The soldiers, previously a symbol of Marcus's control, now seemed like a storm cloud ready to burst. She could sense the fear radiating from the townsfolk, yet amidst the uncertainty, a flicker of determination ignited within her. "Together?" Clara shouted, her voice cutting through the panic like a beacon. "We will not be divided. Stand firm." But as she spoke, the soldiers advanced, their expressions cold and unyielding. Clara caught a glimpse of Marcus, his face a mask of satisfaction, the glint in his eyes betraying his delight at the unfolding turmoil. He had orchestrated this chaos, and now it was spiraling into something he could not control. Just then a commotion erupted at the back of the hall as several townsfolk surged forward, attempting to push past the soldiers in a desperate bid for freedom. Clara's heart raced as she realized that the soldiers were not merely there to intimidate, they were there to enforce Marcus's will with brute force. Panic surged through the crowd like wildfire, and Clara felt the ground beneath her tremble. "Clara, we have to go," Thomas shouted, his voice strained with urgency as he grabbed her arm. "Now!" With a deep breath, Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. "This way," she urged, leading Thomas and a few others toward a side door she had noticed earlier. The path was narrow and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting in the main hall. As they slipped through the door, Clara felt a rush of adrenaline. The hallway was lined with portraits of past generals, their eyes seeming to follow her as she hurried down the corridor. The echoes of shouts and the clatter of boots behind them intensified her urgency. She could hear the soldiers barking orders, the growing unrest of the townsfolk still audible in the background. "Where do we go from here?" Thomas asked breathlessly, glancing back as if the soldiers might burst through the door at any moment. "There's a back entrance to the gardens," Clara replied, her mind racing. "If we can reach it, we might find a way out." They navigated the labyrinthine halls, adrenaline propelling them forward. Clara's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, of Marcus, of the townsfolk, of the fragile hope that had sparked within her. She could not let fear dictate their fate. They would escape, regroup, and return to confront the general. Finally, they reached the back entrance, a heavy wooden door that creaked ominously as Clara pushed it open. The cool night air rushed in, invigorating her senses and washing over her like a refreshing tide. But the peace was short-lived. A chorus of distant shouts echoed in the distance, the soldiers' pursuit relentless. "Quickly!" Clara urged, and they stepped out into the moonlit garden, the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers mingling with the tension of the moment. They dashed toward the hedges lining the perimeter, hoping to find a way to scale the wall and escape into the night. Suddenly, the sharp sound of a gunshot rang out, ricocheting through the garden like a thunderclap. Clara froze, her heart leaping into her throat. "Run!" Thomas shouted, pulling her forward. They ducked behind a row of dense bushes, the world around them a blur of shadows and uncertainty. As they crouched, Clara's mind raced. She thought of the townsfolk still inside, the ones who had rallied around her, who believed in a different future. She could not abandon them to Marcus' wrath. "We have to go back," she said, her voice urgent and fierce. Thomas shook his head, his expression fierce with desperation. "And what will that accomplish? We need to regroup, find help." But Clara's heart was set. She had faced Marcus and his machinations, and she would not turn her back on the community that needed her. "We can't leave them," she insisted, her voice firm. With a shared glance of understanding, they made their decision. They would find a way to confront Marcus together. The night was fraught with danger, but Clara felt a fierce resolve rising within her. This was not merely about escape. It was about reclaiming her power, about standing for something greater than herself. As they moved through the garden, Clara felt the weight of the night pressing down around them. The shadows loomed large, but she would not be swallowed by them. The path ahead was uncertain, but she would face whatever lay ahead with courage and conviction. Together they would return to the fray. The battle for Eldridge had only just begun. Chapter 17. The moon hung high in the sky, casting silver light over the manicured gardens of Marcus's mansion. Clara and Thomas crouched behind the dense hedges, their hearts racing as they listened intently to the distant shouts and the echo of hurried footsteps that reverberated through the night. The air was thick with tension, a palpable reminder that they were not merely fleeing, but on the precipice of a confrontation that could change everything. "Clara," Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible, "we need to move. The soldiers will be searching for us." Clara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. They could escape through the gardens, vanish into the night, but what of the townsfolk they left behind? The very thought of abandoning them filled her with a deep sense of dread. "We can't just run," she replied, her voice steady. "If we leave now, Marcus will tighten his grip on Eldridge." Thomas looked at her, his brow furrowed with concern. "What do you propose? We can't take on the soldiers alone." Clara took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying like iron. "We need to gather support. There are people who believe in this cause, who are willing to stand against Marcus. We can't let fear silence us." As they moved cautiously through the garden, Clara recalled the faces of her supporters, the women who had stood by her side. The farmers, like Thomas, who had fought for their rights. She felt a surge of determination. They would not be alone in this fight. They would rally their community. They carefully made their way through the maze of hedges until they reached the edge of the property, where a narrow path led toward the outskirts of town. The stars twinkled above, a silent witness to their resolve. Clara felt a connection to the vastness of the universe, a reminder that they were part of something larger, a struggle for justice, for voice, and for identity. "Where to now?" Thomas asked, glancing back at the mansion, where the shadows of soldiers flitted like wraiths. "To the tavern," Clara replied decisively. "It's a gathering place. If we can reach it, we can call for help. The townsfolk will listen to us there." As they made their way toward the heart of Eldridge, Clara's mind buzzed with ideas. She envisioned a meeting, a call to arms, where she could lay bare Marcus's machinations and rally the townsfolk to stand united. It was a daunting task, but the fire of purpose ignited her spirit. Upon reaching the tavern, they slipped through the back door, the familiar scent of ale and wood smoke enveloping them like an old friend. Inside, the atmosphere was charged. The laughter and chatter faded as eyes turned to Clara and Thomas, their disheveled appearance drawing attention. "Clara!" Mrs. Whitfield exclaimed, rising from her seat. "What happened? We heard the commotion at the general's." "Marcus has sent soldiers to intimidate us," Clara replied, her voice steady but urgent. "He seeks to silence our voices, to crush our hopes. But we cannot allow him to succeed." A murmur of concern rippled through the crowd, and Clara felt the weight of their gazes upon her. She saw fear reflected in their eyes, but also a flicker of determination. "We must stand together," she continued, her heart pounding with passion. "We are stronger united than divided. We cannot let fear dictate our future." The tavern buzzed with the energy of whispered conversations, and Clara felt the tide beginning to turn. She could see the flicker of resolve igniting in the faces of those she had once considered allies. They were no longer mere townsfolk. They were a community, ready to reclaim their voice. As Clara spoke, she felt the room tighten around her, the weight of their collective hopes and fears merging into a singular purpose. We have the power to resist. We must plan, strategize, and prepare to confront Marcus and his soldiers. Together, we can reclaim our town. The crowd erupted into fervent discussion, voices rising in a chorus of defiance. Clara felt a surge of hope swell within her. This was the moment she had longed for, a collective awakening that would not be easily extinguished. As the night wore on, Clara and Thomas moved among the gathered townsfolk, igniting sparks of courage and conviction. The air crackled with determination, and Clara knew that the storm was gathering, not just outside in the world, but within their hearts. They were ready to face the unthinkable, to rise against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. Together, they would forge a path toward a brighter future, no longer merely shadows in Marcus's game. They were the dawn breaking on a new day, and the fight for Eldridge had only just begun. Chapter 18. As dawn broke over Eldridge, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the lingering shadows of the night, illuminating the town with a golden hue. Clara stood at the center of the tavern, the remnants of their fervent discussions still echoing in her mind. The faces of her neighbors, once filled with uncertainty, now radiated a renewed sense of purpose. It was a transformation born from necessity, and Clara felt the weight of their hopes resting heavily upon her shoulders. Around her, the tavern buzzed with the energy of a newly ignited spirit. Townsfolk gathered in small groups, their voices a tapestry of plans and strategies. Clara could see the determination etched on their faces. The fear that had once paralyzed them was now morphing into a fierce resolve. They were ready to confront the threat that loomed, ready to reclaim their community from the grasp of Marcus and his soldiers. "Clara," Thomas said, stepping closer, his brow furrowed with concern. "What is our plan? We need to act swiftly before Marcus consolidates his power." Clara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. We need to send messengers to the neighboring towns to gather support. If we can unite our voices, we will stand a chance against Marca's tyranny." As she spoke, the tavern door swung open and a figure stepped inside, Mrs. Whitfield, her demeanor a blend of concern and resolve. "I've spoken to several of the town leaders," she announced, her voice steady. "They're willing to join us, but we need a demonstration of strength. We must show Marcus that we are united." Clara felt a surge of hope. "Then let's organize a gathering in the town square. We can invite everyone, farmers, merchants, families. It's time to make our stand." The townsfolk nodded in agreement, the energy in the room palpable. Clara could feel the momentum building, a collective heartbeat that thrummed with anticipation. They were no longer isolated voices. They were a chorus, ready to rise together. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Clara and her allies sprang into action. They spread the word, sending messengers to neighboring communities and preparing for the gathering. The tavern transformed into a hub of activity, filled with people crafting banners and organizing supplies, a vibrant testament to their shared determination. The town square, a once quiet space, began to bustle with life as townsfolk from all walks of life converged. Clara stood at the edge, her heart swelling with pride as she witnessed the unity that had blossomed from despair. Families arrived, hand in hand, farmers with their tools and merchants with their goods. Each person brought their own story, their own struggles, and together they formed a tapestry of resilience. As the sun reached its zenith, Clara stepped onto a makeshift platform, her heart racing as she faced the gathering crowd. The murmurs subsided, and all eyes turned to her, filled with hope and expectation. She felt a wave of emotion wash over her, the weight of responsibility, but also the exhilaration of purpose. "Friends, neighbors, citizens of Eldridge," she began, her voice steady and clear, "we stand at a crossroads. For too long we have been divided, our voices silenced by fear. But today we rise together. Today we reclaim our future." A cheer erupted from the crowd, a sound that echoed through the square like a battle cry. Clara felt the energy surge around her, a palpable force that connected them all. Marcus seeks to control us, to instill fear, and manipulate our trust. But we are stronger than his threats. We are united in our resolve. As she spoke, Clara could see the fire igniting in the eyes of her neighbors. The embers of courage that had flickered during the night now blazed brightly, illuminating the path ahead. Let us not be shadows in his game. Let us stand as a community, a force against oppression. We will show Marcus that we are not afraid. The crowd roared in agreement, and Clara's heart soared. She had awakened something powerful within them, a determination to fight for their rights, for their voices, for their future. She could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of the change that was unfolding. As the cheers echoed through the square, Clara knew that the battle ahead would be fraught with challenges. But standing among her neighbors, she felt an unshakable conviction. Together, they would forge a new path, one where their voices would ring clear and true. The call to arms had been sounded, and the spirit of Eldridge was ready to rise against the gathering storm. Chapter 19. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm amber glow over Eldridge as Clara prepared for the confrontation that lay ahead. The town square, once a place of idle chatter and market stalls, had transformed into a battleground of ideals and aspirations. Banners fluttered in the breeze, their vibrant colors proclaiming unity and resistance, a testament to the power of a community awakened. Clara stood among her neighbors, the energy palpable as they gathered, their faces a mixture of determination and apprehension. Each person had come not only for themselves, but for the collective future of Eldridge. As she looked around, she felt a surge of gratitude for the courage that had blossomed overnight, an unexpected bloom amidst the thorns of fear. "Are you ready?" Thomas asked, stepping beside her, his expression grave yet resolute. Clara nodded, her heart racing with a blend of excitement and trepidation. "Today, we make our stand," she replied, her voice steady. "Today, we show Marcus that we will not be silenced." As the crowd swelled, Clara felt the weight of their hopes resting on her shoulders. She climbed onto the platform once more, the familiar wood beneath her feet grounding her. The murmurs of the crowd quieted, and she took a deep breath, allowing the moment to sink in. "Citizens of Eldridge," she began, her voice clear and ringing across the square. "We gather here not just to resist, but to reclaim our right to be heard. General Marcus believes he can control us through fear and intimidation, but we are more than mere subjects to his will. We are a community, bound by our shared struggles and dreams." A cheer erupted from the crowd, a wave of sound that surged through her, igniting her spirit. Clara could see their resolve reflected in their eyes, a collective determination that fortified her own. "Let us remember why we stand here today," she continued, her heart swelling with passion. "We fight for our families, for our neighbors, for the legacy we leave for future generations. We fight for a town where our voices are valued, where our choices matter." As she spoke, the tension in the air thickened, and Clara sensed a shift. The distant sound of marching boots echoed through the square, a reminder of the soldiers that Marcus had unleashed. The crowd shifted uneasily, their eyes darting toward the sound. Clara's heart pounded, but she refused to show fear. "Stay strong," she called out, her voice rising above the murmurs of apprehension. "We will not be intimidated. They may come with weapons, but we come with our convictions, our unity." The soldiers, led by Marcus himself, marched into view, their uniforms gleaming ominously in the fading light. Clara's stomach twisted, but she stood her ground, meeting Marcus' gaze with unwavering defiance. His expression was a mixture of disdain and amusement, as if he were watching a child playing at war. "Clara," he called out, his voice smooth and mocking. "How quaint. You gather your townsfolk like sheep, believing you can take a stand against the authority I represent. This is foolishness." "Foolishness?" Clara shot back, her voice fierce. "What is foolish is believing that you can silence our voices. We are not afraid of you, Marcus. We stand united." His laughter echoed through the square, chilling her to the bone. "Unity? You think this rabble can challenge my power? You will all regret this day." As he spoke, the soldiers flanked him, their expressions hard and unyielding. Clara felt a wave of fear ripple through the crowd, but she refused to back down. She raised her hand, urging silence, and the townsfolk fell quiet, their eyes locked on her. "You see," she said, turning to the crowd, her voice steady, "this is the face of oppression, a man who thrives on fear and division. But we are stronger than his threats. Together, we can face whatever he throws at us." The crowd erupted into cheers once more, the sound echoing like thunder, filling Clara with resolve. She stepped forward, challenging Marcus with her gaze. "We will not be intimidated. We will stand our ground, and we will fight for what is right." The tension in the square reached a boiling point, and Clara felt the energy shift. The townsfolk stood firm, their unity a shield against Marcus's intimidation. Clara knew that the confrontation was just beginning, but she felt a profound sense of hope. Together, they would face the storm, unyielding and fierce. As Marcus's expression darkened, Clara knew that this was a pivotal moment, not just for her, but for all of Eldridge. The battle for their future had begun, and she was ready to lead. The sun may have begun to set, but their resolve shone brightly, illuminating the path ahead. Chapter 20. The air crackled with tension as Clara faced General Marcus, the spectacle of their confrontation unfolding like a tightly wound coil ready to snap. The townsfolk, a sea of determined faces, stood behind her, their collective breath held in anticipation. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting elongated shadows that seemed to stretch toward the impending clash, encapsulating the gravity of the moment. "Clara," Marcus began, his voice dripping with condescension, "you play a dangerous game. You would have these simple folk believe they can challenge me? You underestimate the power of authority." Clara's heart raced, but she stood tall, refusing to flinch under the weight of his scorn. "Authority built on fear is not true power, Marcus. We are not mere subjects to be controlled. We are a community, and together we are stronger than you think." The crowd murmured, a ripple of support that surged through her, fortifying her resolve. Clara glanced at Thomas, who stood at the forefront, his eyes gleaming with pride and determination. She could feel the energy shifting, a palpable current of defiance that began to erode the facade of Marcus's authority. "Your words are meaningless," Marcus retorted, his tone icy. "You rally these people around you, but when faced with real consequences, they will scatter like leaves in the wind." "Perhaps," Clara replied, her voice steady and unwavering, "but I believe in the strength of our convictions. We have endured your tyranny long enough. We will not be silenced any longer." A chorus of agreement erupted from the crowd, a wave of sound that filled the square and drowned out Marcus's scorn. Clara felt a surge of hope. This was the moment they had been building toward, a moment where fear could be transformed into courage, where silence could be turned into a resonant voice of unity. "Enough of this charade," Marcus barked, his face contorting with anger. He gestured to the soldiers flanking him. "Do your duty. Show them what happens when they defy the law." As he spoke, the soldiers stepped forward, their expressions hardening into grim masks. Clara's heart quickened, but she sensed the townsfolk tightening around her, their determination coalescing into a formidable wall of resistance. "Stand firm," she shouted, raising her hand in defiance. "We will not be cowed by threats or violence. We are prepared to fight for our rights, for our future." The soldiers hesitated, their resolve wavering for a fleeting moment as they surveyed the passionate crowd. Clara felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Perhaps they could reach the hearts of those in uniform, men and women who, too, had families and dreams. "Look at them," Clara called out, her voice rising above the tumult. "Do you truly believe they wish to fight against their own people? We are not enemies. We are neighbors, friends. We only seek to live freely, to voice our desires without fear of retribution." A murmur of uncertainty rippled through the ranks of soldiers. Clara seized the moment, stepping closer to the front, her gaze piercing. "Join us. Stand with us against oppression. You are not our enemies. The true enemy is the fear that binds us." Marcus, sensing the tide shifting, stepped forward, his face contorted with rage. "You are a fool, Clara. You think they will side with you? They know the consequences." But Clara pressed on, undeterred. "We all know the cost of silence, General. We have paid it dearly, but today we choose to speak. Today we choose freedom." The crowd erupted into cheers once again, a resounding declaration of unity that seemed to reverberate off the very walls of the square. Clara could see the soldiers' resolve beginning to falter, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. They were caught between duty and conscience, and the moment hung in the balance. "Will you fight for a tyrant?" Clara challenged, her voice ringing clear. "Or will you stand with your fellow citizens? The choice is yours." As the soldiers hesitated, murmurs of dissent began to ripple through their ranks. Clara felt the ground beneath her shift, and hope surged within her. Perhaps today would not end in violence after all. Perhaps they could forge a new path together, one built on understanding rather than fear. In that charged moment, time seemed to stretch, the weight of history pressing down upon them. Clara's heart raced, not with fear, but with a fierce determination. The tide was turning, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The fight for Eldridge was far from over, but together they stood poised on the brink of a new dawn.